He moved quietly through the music shop, the same way he moved through most places in life, with soft steps and eyes that avoided attention. People often walked past him without noticing he was even there. He didn't mind it most days. In fact, he had gotten used to the feeling of blending into the background. It was almost comforting to know no one expected anything from him. The music shop owner let him work a few hours after school. It wasn't an official job, more like a favor. He swept the floor, wiped dust off old guitars, and made sure the piano keys stayed clean. Sometimes customers asked him small questions, like where the sheet music section was or whether the store had strings for a specific instrument. He answered politely, always in a quiet voice. But the thing people did notice about him, if they happened to look long enough, was that he always carried an old, beat-up notebook. It was thin, full of folded pages, and looked like it had survived years of being opened and closed too many times. He kept it close, as if it was the only thing in the world he truly trusted. Inside that notebook were tiny marks, scribbles, lines, and strange symbols. To anyone else, it looked like nonsense. But to him, each mark had meaning. They were sounds he translated into shapes, emotions he turned into patterns. He didn't write songs the way most people did. He wrote feelings. Every page told a quiet story, even if no one ever saw it. He didn't talk much at school. Most teachers described him as polite but distant. Other students didn't bother him, but they didn't include him either. He ate lunch alone, usually near the back of the cafeteria. He didn't complain about it. Being alone felt normal. It felt familiar. He lived in a small room at a group home, where several other kids stayed. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't warm either. There were rules, schedules, routines, and a lot of noise. He never complained. He simply tried to stay out of the way. At night, while the others laughed, argued, or played loud music, he sat on his bed with his notebook and headphones, letting the world around him fade. He couldn't remember much about his parents. Only flashes. A soft voice humming, someone tapping piano keys, warm hands guiding his own. These memories were blurry, like dreams he was constantly reaching for, but could never fully catch. But those little pieces of memory were enough to remind him that music had been a part of him long, before he even understood what it meant. Sometimes the group home supervisor found him asleep with his notebook still open beside him. She would carefully close it and place it under his pillow. She didn't understand his drawings either, but she knew they mattered to him. That was enough. One afternoon at the music shop, he sat near the old upright piano. It had scratches on the side and several keys that stuck if pressed too hard. But he liked it. He liked how imperfect it was. He gently pressed a few keys, listening to the soft, uneven sound. He wasn't practicing anything specific, just letting the keys speak. A customer walked in, a man with a heavy coat and a phone pressed to his ear. He barely glanced at the boy at the piano, but he paused for a moment when he heard the notes. The boy didn't notice. He kept playing, unaware of the small audience behind him. The man raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Kid's got something," he murmured before returning to his call and heading toward the back of the store. Moments like that happened here and there, but the boy never knew. He didn't play to show off. He played because he didn't know how else to express what lived inside him. He finished the soft run of notes and closed the piano lid halfway, just as the store bell chimed again. This time, it was an older woman holding a newspaper folded under her arm. She greeted the shop owner, then turned to the boy. "You like music, don't you?" she said with a gentle smile. He nodded silently. "You ever heard of the Billionaire who made some strange music challenge?" she asked, tapping her newspaper. He shook his head. She unfolded the paper and pointed to a headline. There was a picture of a well-dressed man standing in front of a large modern building. The title read, Tech Billionaire Announces Unbreakable Musical Code. Prize offered to whoever can solve it. The boy stared at the picture for a moment, then at the smaller text describing a puzzle hidden inside a short piece of music. People all over the world were trying to figure it out. Experts, teachers, musicians, even computers. But so far, no one could solve it. It's all everyone is talking about, the woman continued. They say the code holds a melody that's supposed to be impossible to find. The shop owner joined the conversation. I heard even professional composers gave up. Some people think it's just a stunt to get attention. The boy listened quietly, but his eyes kept drifting back to the picture and the words beneath it. Maybe someone with the right kind of mind will solve it, the old woman added, smiling kindly at the boy before leaving. He wasn't sure why, but those words stayed with him long after she walked out the door. That evening, after closing the shop, he sat at the piano again. The store lights were dim, and the street outside was almost empty. He opened his notebook to a blank page and traced the edge of his pencil along the paper. He wondered what the billionaire's code sounded like. Was it confusing? Chaotic? Or maybe it was quiet and emotional, like the memories he barely remembered. He didn't know yet. But something inside him felt drawn to it. He reached into the shop owner's computer and searched for a short clip of the challenge audio. It didn't take long to find. People everywhere were talking about it. He placed the headphones gently over his ears and pressed play. The sound that came through was a mix of strange tones, scattered rhythms, and unclear patterns. Most people described it as noise. But to him, it didn't sound random at all. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. There was something hidden in there, something quiet, something fragile. He replayed the clip. Then again, and again. Each time listening deeper, not with his ears, but with that part of him that understood things without words. Slowly, almost without realizing, he lifted his pencil and started drawing small shapes in his notebook. A curve, a loop, a cluster of tiny marks. He wasn't analyzing it the way a trained musician would. He was following a feeling. The more he listened, the more the scattered sounds began to form a familiar pattern in his mind. It was like trying to remember a dream after waking up, piece by piece, until the picture finally came together. He didn't know how much time had passed. The shop was silent. The world outside felt far away. For the first time in a long time, he felt his heart beat a little faster. He wasn't just curious. He was connected to something. He removed the headphones slowly and stared at the marks he had drawn. Was it possible that he, someone no one noticed, was hearing something the world's experts had missed? He didn't dare say it out loud. But deep inside, a small spark lit up. Maybe this strange musical code wasn't as impossible as everyone believed. Maybe it was waiting for someone who listened differently. And without meaning to. He whispered a quiet promise to himself as he closed the piano lid. For the night, he would try. He didn't know what would come from it, but he would try. He woke up the next morning with the same sound from the night before echoing in his mind. The coded melody, the strange mix of scattered tones, stayed with him like a soft whisper that refused to leave. Even while brushing his teeth or tying his shoes, the pattern played in the back of his thoughts. He didn't completely understand it yet, but he felt something hidden inside it, something waiting. He walked to the music shop slowly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket. The air was cool, and the morning streets were quiet. He liked this time of day, when everything felt calm and untouched. It gave him room to think. And today, his thoughts stayed locked on the code. When he reached the shop, the owner was already at the counter, flipping through a stack of receipts. He nodded at the boy, who nodded back. They didn't talk much in the mornings. They didn't need to. The boy set his bag down in the corner and pulled out his old notebook. He opened it to the page where he had drawn the shapes from the night before. The lines were small and almost messy, but he knew exactly what each one meant. The shop owner noticed the focused look on the boy's face. "You working on something?" he asked casually. The boy hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Schoolwork?" Another shake of the head. The owner raised an eyebrow. "Music?" This time, the boy gave a small nod. The owner smiled, but didn't pry. He knew the boy had a mind full of things he never said out loud. Once the morning chores were done, the boy sat at the piano again. He lifted the lid slowly and touched a few keys. They sounded uneven, but familiar. The piano had its flaws, but he appreciated them. It felt like the instrument understood him in some strange way. He placed the headphones over one ear, listening to the code again on the shop computer. With his other ear, he tapped the piano keys, matching each odd tone to a note he could understand. It wasn't perfect, but it helped him get closer to whatever lay beneath the surface of the coded melody. To an outsider, it probably looked like he was simply pressing random keys. But inside his mind, something was forming. A pattern, a shape, a faint melody hidden under the confusion. He took notes in his notebook, writing more symbols, lines, and curves. He didn't think about how unusual it was. He didn't think about the fact that trained musicians all over the world were struggling to make sense of the same audio he was listening to. He wasn't trying to solve anything for a reward. He wasn't trying to win. He was simply trying to understand. Around midday, a group of students walked into the shop, laughing loudly. They browsed the guitars and tested out a few drums. The boy stepped aside so he wouldn't get in their way. One of the students noticed him sitting at the piano and smirked. "You actually play that thing?" the boy asked, nudging his friend. The orphaned boy nodded once. "Play something, then," the student said, folding his arms. The boy didn't like attention, but he didn't want to cause trouble. So he pressed a few soft notes, nothing flashy, just enough to show he wasn't pretending. The student's laughter faded a little. Not because the boy played loudly or dramatically, but because the sound he created felt calm, almost soothing. "Whoa," one of them whispered. Another shook his head. "He's better than he looks." The boy kept his eyes down, embarrassed, and stopped playing. The student soon left, but the shop owner walked over afterward. "You shouldn't hide what you can do," he said kindly. The boy didn't respond, but he listened. Later that afternoon, the older woman from the day before returned. The same one who had first mentioned the Billionaire's musical challenge. She greeted the shop owner, then approached the boy again. "I heard more people are trying that code," she said, waving a new newspaper. "They say the billionaire himself is shocked no one has solved it yet." The boy looked up with quiet curiosity. She unfolded the paper again and held it toward him. There was a new article describing how musicians from many countries had attempted to break the code, but kept failing. There was even a quote from the billionaire saying, "This code is not about skill. It's about understanding the emotion hidden inside the sound." Those words hit the boy differently than the rest of the article. He read them twice, then a third time. Understanding emotion. That was something he knew better than most people. He probably made it impossible on purpose, the woman said with a laugh. Rich people sometimes do strange things when they're bored. But the boy didn't laugh. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a challenge. There was more to it. When the woman left, the boy returned to the piano, gently pressing the keys as he replayed the coded sound in his mind. There was one moment in the audio, just one, that kept standing out to him. A slight shift, a soft pause, a sound almost too small for most people to notice, but he heard it. It reminded him of something. He didn't know what. Maybe a memory, maybe a feeling, but it wasn't random. The shop was quiet that evening. The owner had stepped out to take a call. The streets outside had grown darker, and the soft glow of the shop lights made everything feel warmer. The boy placed both headphones over his ears and closed his eyes. He let the coded audio play through fully this time without stopping, without trying to analyze it. He let it wash over him like a wave, and as he listened, he felt something shift inside him. For a moment, it felt like the sound wasn't just sound. It was trying to say something, to speak in a language only the heart understood. He didn't understand how he knew that. He just did. When he opened his eyes, he reached for his notebook quickly and began writing. But this time, he didn't draw small lines or shapes. He began writing longer patterns, full musical paths instead of tiny symbols. His hand moved quickly, almost too quickly, like the melody was pouring out faster than he could catch it. His breathing grew unsteady. His heart beat faster. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. He was falling into the sound completely. He replayed the audio again, and the same hidden pattern surfaced. He replayed it again, and the pattern became clearer. He tapped the piano keys gently, matching his drawn symbols to real notes. The piano's imperfect sound almost made it better. More human. More real. With every note he played, the coded melody became less confusing and more familiar, as though it had always been waiting for him. He didn't realize how much time had passed until the shop owner returned and flipped on the brighter lights. "You're still here?" the owner asked softly. The boy blinked, startled. He nodded. "You look like you've been somewhere far away." The boy hesitated, then showed him the notebook page. The owner looked at it, confused. "I don't understand it," he admitted, "but I can tell you do." The boy gently pressed a few keys, playing a small piece he had drawn. The notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they carried a depth that made the owner pause. "That's beautiful," the owner whispered. The boy shook his head. "It's not finished." "Whatever it is, keep going," the owner said. "You're on to something." That night, the boy walked back to the group home with the notebook pressed against his chest. The sky above was cloudy, but he didn't notice. His mind was full of music. When he reached his small room, he sat on his bed with the notebook open in front of him. He traced the lines with his fingertips. For the first time, he wondered if he could really solve the Billionaires. Code. Not because he wanted the prize, not because he wanted attention, but because something inside him felt deeply connected to the hidden melody, like it was calling out to him, waiting for him to bring it back into the world. He placed his headphones on again and listened to the coded audio one more time before sleeping. This time, he didn't hear confusion. He heard a soft, unfinished song, and he knew he had to find the rest of it. He woke up before the sun, long before anyone else in the group home stirred. The room was dim, and the faint sound of someone snoring down the hall reminded him that the world was still half asleep. But he couldn't rest, not even for another minute. His mind was buzzing with the melody from the code, the strange pattern that had taken hold of him. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, reaching immediately for his notebook. The page from the night before was still open, marked with lines that curved and crossed like a soft whisper turned into ink. He traced them lightly, remembering how the sound had seemed to guide his hand. Today, he told himself quietly, he would understand more. He put on his shoes, grabbed his notebook, and slipped out of the group home before anyone noticed. The air outside was cold and still. His breath formed small clouds as he walked, but he barely felt the chill. His thoughts were somewhere else entirely. By the time he reached the music shop, the sky had only started to lighten. The shop owner wasn't there yet, but the back door was usually unlocked for early deliveries. He pushed it gently, and to his relief, it opened. Inside, the shop felt peaceful. No customers, no noise, just the quiet hum of the world waking up. He walked straight to the piano, sat down, and let his fingers hover over the keys. He opened his notebook, placed it on the stand, and replayed the coded audio from his phone. Even through the small speakers, the sound hit him the same way as before. Confusing to most ears, but not to him. To him, it was a puzzle with pieces already forming in his mind. He pressed a few keys softly, matching the tones. Then more. Before long, he began building the melody he had been hearing in his head all night. It wasn't perfect, not yet. But it was becoming something real. He didn't notice the time passing. He didn't see the sun rise. He didn't hear the shop owner arrive and stand quietly behind him. The owner finally spoke after several minutes. "You're here early." The boy jumped slightly, startled. He turned and gave a small nod, unsure what to say. "Couldn't sleep?" The owner asked gently. Another small nod. The owner smiled. "Well, whatever you're working on, it sounds like you're getting somewhere." The boy didn't answer, but he looked down at his notebook and then at the piano, as if trying to figure out how to explain something he didn't have words for. The owner didn't push him. Instead, he went to make coffee and quietly opened the shop for the day. As customers began coming in, the boy stepped aside and returned to organizing music sheets. But even as he worked, the melody stayed in his head. It played behind his thoughts like a soft echo. Later in the afternoon, when the shop was less busy, he returned to the piano. He placed his notebook in front of him and took a deep breath. He played through the notes he had figured out. The melody was fragile, gentle, like something broken slowly finding its shape again. Anyone else might not recognize it, but he felt it. Every part of it. After a few minutes, he stopped and leaned back. There was still something missing. A turning point, a shift, a quiet answer to the emotion hidden in the melody. He listened to the coded audio again, letting his eyes fall shut. And then he heard it faint, almost lost in the noise. A tiny change in rhythm, a soft hint of sadness. He opened his eyes quickly and began writing again, filling another page in his notebook. He didn't realize the old woman who often visited the shop had walked in. She watched him with gentle curiosity. "You're working hard on something," she said. He looked up, surprised. He nodded slowly. She walked closer. "Is it that music puzzle still?" He hesitated, then nodded again. She laughed softly. "Most people gave up on that days ago. They said it was impossible." He didn't say anything. She looked at the notebook, at the strange lines he had written. "You really think you can solve it?" The boy looked at the piano keys, then back at the coded audio on his phone. Finally, he nodded. The woman's eyebrows lifted slightly. Not in disbelief, but in surprise. "Well," she said, "if anyone could find meaning in that sound, I suppose it might be someone like you." He wasn't sure what that meant, but her tone felt kind. In the evening, after she left, the shop grew quiet again. The boy sat at the piano until the owner locked the front door. "You can stay a bit longer," the owner said softly. "Just lock the back door when you're done." The boy nodded gratefully. He waited until the owner's footsteps faded, then placed his notebook on the piano stand again. He pressed play on the coded audio once more. This time, he didn't try to break it apart. He didn't try to search for patterns. He simply listened. The strange mix of tones washed over him, filling the quiet room. And as he listened, something surprising happened. He felt something. I-G-A-V-I-N-E-S-S. A distant sense of loss. Not his own. Loss, but someone else's. Someone who created the code. Someone who put something deeply personal inside it. His. Hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the piano keys. He played the melody he had written so far. Then, when he reached the part he couldn't figure out earlier, he let the emotion guide him. A new sequence formed. Soft, gentle, release of sadness. The missing piece. He wrote it down quickly before it could escape. He played it again and again. With each repetition, it felt more complete. For the first time, he believed he wasn't just guessing or imagining things. He was actually finding the melody hidden in the code. By the time he packed his things to leave, the shop was dark and silent. But the melody played in his heart with full clarity. The next few days became a pattern he had never experienced. School, the shop, the piano, the coded audio, the notebook. Over and over. But it didn't feel tiring. It felt like he was living for something. Students at school noticed. He was quieter than usual, something they didn't think was even possible. Teachers noticed he wasn't as focused during class. But no one understood why. He couldn't explain it. How could he? He didn't even fully understand it himself. At the shop, customers began noticing him too. Not because he talked more, not because he looked different, but because when he played the piano, the sound carried something real. Something that made people pause their conversations. Even if only for a moment. The shop owner watched all of this with growing wonder. One evening, as the boy played a soft section of the melody, the owner approached him. "I think you should show this to someone," he said softly. The boy froze. He wasn't ready for attention. "This melody you're finding." The owner continued. "It's not ordinary. It sounds like something important." The boy lowered his gaze. "Do you want me to help you submit it?" The owner asked. Submit it. The thought made the boy's chest tighten. That meant showing the world what he had found. That meant opening himself up to being judged. He wasn't sure he could handle that. He shook his head slowly. "For now," he whispered, "I want to finish it." The owner understood. "Then finish it," he said. "But don't hide forever." That night, the boy returned to the group home exhausted, but filled with a strange kind of excitement. He lay in bed, feeling the melody echo through him. He wasn't just close. He knew he was on the edge of unlocking the full meaning behind the code. But he also felt something else. A quiet fear. What if the melody held something too big? Something he wasn't ready for? He pushed that thought away. He closed his eyes. The melody played again in the quiet of his mind. In that moment, he didn't realize that his life, quiet, unnoticed, and ordinary, was only days away from changing in ways he never imagined. All because he could hear something the world had missed. The days that followed moved in a blur for him. He had never been inside a world so large, so loud, and so full of rules that seemed to exist only to confuse someone like him. Yet despite all of it, he kept walking back into the billionaire's mansion every morning, quietly stepping through the wide doorway as if he did not want to disturb the silence of the place. He carried no bag, no phone, nothing except the small notebook he had used for years. The notebook was old now, its corners bent, its pages filled with tiny handwritten notes and half-finished drawings of music shapes he had created on his own. He felt strange walking along the polished hallways, not because they were fancy, but because he had never imagined stepping into a life like this. Each day he wondered if someone would tell him to leave, to stop dreaming, to go back to his small room in the shelter he had lived in for most of his life. But that moment never came. Instead, he always found the billionaire waiting for him inside the music room, either leaning on the grand piano or sitting with a thoughtful look on his face. The billionaire watched him like a teacher watches his best student. He never smiled too widely, but his eyes softened each time a young man sat at the piano bench. He seemed to understand something many adults had missed all along. The boy did not need comfort or praise. He needed space to grow. So he gave him that space. The music room became his world. It was bright, warm, and filled with quiet air that made every sound feel important. He would sit with his notebook open on the bench beside him, his fingers moving across the keys in slow patterns. The billionaire had asked him to decode the musical puzzle, the strange coded melody that no expert could understand. At first, the boy felt nervous. He knew many people believed he was gifted, but he had never been asked to solve something that famous musicians and trained composers had failed to understand. Still, he tried. He played every version of the melody he could imagine. He rewrote it backward, broke it into smaller pieces, and traced the notes into new shapes. Some afternoons, he sat quietly for hours with his hands resting on the piano keys, listening to the soft hum of the house. Other days, he played until his arms felt tired and his notebook filled with fresh lines and circles that only he understood. The billionaire always stayed patient. He watched from a distance, never pushing, never rushing. It was as if he knew the boy needed to find the answer on his own. And maybe he already believed the boy would, eventually. One afternoon, after nearly a week of trying, the boy noticed something unusual in the melody. It was a pattern he had not seen before, not in books, not in the codes he remembered from school, not anywhere else. It didn't look like normal music. It looked more like a message, but he didn't fully understand it yet. The sun outside slowly sank as the boy repeated the strange section over and over. He pressed the same 3 notes again and again, each time a little softer, a little slower, as if the answer was trying to speak, but felt too shy to come forward. The billionaire finally stepped closer. "What do you hear?" he asked in a gentle tone. The boy hesitated. He was used to adults telling him he was wrong, used to being ignored or being told he was imagining things. But the billionaire did not seem like those other adults. There was something about the way he listened not, so the boy answered quietly. "It sounds like a name." The billionaire's expression changed. Not in a dramatic way, no gasp, no shock, but a quiet shift, like a heavy thought had landed inside him. "A name?" he repeated softly. "I think so," the boy whispered. "It's hidden in the notes. It's not written with letters. It's written with movement, like the notes are stepping somewhere." He lightly pressed the keys as he spoke, showing the small rise and fall in the melody. This part rises, then it falls, then it stops. That shape. I think I've seen it before. The billionaire watched him play it again, this time with a deeper look, as if the melody had suddenly become something more than music. "Where have you seen it?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "I'm not sure, but it's familiar." The billionaire walked away slowly, deep in thought. He didn't say anything else. He didn't push for answers. Instead, he left the room, giving the boy more time. As the door closed, the boy kept playing, trying to understand the shape he had recognized. The code felt alive now, like it was calling him toward something. He felt a strange heaviness in his chest, fear, curiosity, and a small spark of hope. He played until the sky outside turned dark. Finally, he stood and stretched his arms. His notebook was full again. His head felt full, too. He left the music room quietly and walked to the guest room the staff had prepared for him. He had never slept in a room so soft, so peaceful. The sheets were warm, and the air smelled clean. Still, it took him a long time to sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to that strange section of the melody. The next morning began earlier than usual. He woke before the sun and walked back to the piano without even waiting for breakfast. Something inside him needed to understand the code. When he sat down to play, the answer came more clearly. He wrote down the note pattern again, but this time he looked not at the music, but at the movement up, down, stop, up, down. A pause, then a long rise, then a fall. Suddenly he knew it wasn't a name written in letters. It was a name written in steps, the same way he used to practice, reading shapes when he was little. He gasped softly, whispered the name under his breath, a name that did not belong to the billionaire. Got a name he had never heard before, yet it felt strangely important. He played the melody again, pressing the keys as lightly as he could. The name repeated inside it, hidden behind soft notes and quiet pauses. Someone had written this code on purpose. Someone had known it would hide something personal. And the boy suddenly understood. The melody was not just a puzzle. It was a message left behind by someone the billionaire once cared about. He felt his heart race, not because he was afraid, but because he knew he had stepped into a story much larger than himself. When the billionaire entered the room later, the boy's hands trembled slightly. He knew he had to share what he found, but he also knew this truth might bring pain. The billionaire noticed the tension immediately. "You found something," he said quietly. The boy nodded. "It's not just music," he whispered. "It's someone you knew." The billionaire's face tightened, not with anger, but with a slow, heavy sadness. "Tell me," he said. So the boy showed him. He played the melody from the beginning, then stopped at the hidden section. He explained the shape, the rise and fall, the way the movement spelled out the name. When he whispered the name again, the billionaire closed his eyes. A long silence followed. Then the billionaire sat down beside him. "You solved something no one else could," he whispered. "And I think you just opened a door I have avoided for many years." The boy lowered his eyes, unsure if he had done something wrong, but the billionaire gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "This isn't a mistake," he said softly. "It's the truth, and I think it's time I face it." The room felt different now. The walls seemed to hold the weight of the moment, the air thicker with memories the boy did not yet understand. He waited quietly. The billionaire stood and walked toward the window. He looked out at the wide garden, the morning sun slowly brightening the leaves. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "I will show you something. Something connected to that name." The boy nodded, unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but ready to follow wherever the story led. As he stepped away from the piano, one thought stayed with him. This code, this melody, it was more than a puzzle. It was a secret waiting to burst open, and he was now part of it. The next morning arrived with a quiet heaviness that neither of them tried to hide. The boy woke early, long before the staff began their usual soft steps around the mansion. He sat on the edge of the guest bed for a moment, listening to the silence. It felt different today, as if the house itself knew something important was about to unfold. He washed his face, combed his hair with his fingers, and stepped into the hallway. He didn't know what the billionaire planned to show him, but he felt it would change the way he understood the melody forever. When he entered the music room, the billionaire was already there. He stood near the piano, but he wasn't studying the keys the way he usually did. Instead, he held a small black box in his hands. It wasn't fancy or shiny. It looked old, worn at the edges, the kind of object people kept not because of its value, but because of the memories tied to it. The billionaire didn't speak at first. He simply waited for the boy to walk closer. There was no rush, no pressure, only a quiet sense of truth waiting to be revealed. "You're early," the billionaire finally said, his voice soft. "So are you," the boy replied. The billionaire gave a small nod, then gestured toward a chair. "Sit. There's something I need you to understand before I show you anything else." The boy took a seat. His notebook rested against his leg, though he wasn't sure he would need it this time. The billionaire held the box carefully, almost protectively. "The name you found yesterday," he began, "belongs to someone I lost long ago." The boy stayed quiet. He didn't want to interrupt. He didn't want to break whatever moment this was. The billionaire continued. "He was the one who wrote that melody. the one everyone called a genius. But he never cared about fame or praise. Music was his way of speaking to the world. A small pause settled in the room, but very few people understood the way he wrote. The billionaire went on. His notes were never just notes. They were messages, patterns, memories. He said music was the only place he felt safe enough to leave pieces of himself. A boy felt a strange connection to that. He had always understood music as a language of its own language, with no rules except the ones written in emotion. The billionaire's voice softened. He was family to me. The boy lowered his eyes. Now he understood the sadness he had seen the day before. He passed away many years ago, the billionaire said. But the melody you decoded, it was the last piece he ever wrote. The boy's eyes widened. He hadn't known that. The melody suddenly felt heavier, more sacred, and no one, the billionaire said, ever understood what it meant. Not the experts, not the musicians I hired, not even the people who claimed to know his work better than anyone. They all heard the notes, but none of them heard the message inside. The boy felt a warm flutter in his chest. Not pride, something gentler, something like belonging. The billionaire slowly opened the black box. Inside was a small stack of old sheets, filled with handwritten notes and markings. The ink had faded, but the feeling behind the strokes was still strong. These, the billionaire said, are the drafts he made for that last melody. The boy leaned forward, careful not to touch anything. The pages looked fragile, as if they might fall apart if handled too roughly. I couldn't look at them for years, the billionaire admitted. But now, I think it's time someone who understands his language sees them. He gently placed the pages on the table. The boy swallowed softly. You want me to read them? The billionaire nodded. If you can. The boy's hands trembled a little as he picked up the first page. It was filled with lines and scribbles, but the scribbles weren't random. They followed a pattern like the shape of the melody he had decoded earlier. He studied the page carefully, moving his finger along the curves. He did the same thing, the boy whispered. The message, it's hidden in the shape, not just the notes. The billionaire sat down across from him. Watching quietly Dot, the boy pulled out his notebook and began comparing the draft to the final melody. The shapes matched. The rises and falls were identical. It was the same name, repeated in different ways. But as he looked deeper, he noticed something else. Dot. There were small marks around the message, tiny dots and lines he hadn't seen before. The boy traced them with his fingertip. These marks, he said softly. They look like directions. The billionaire leaned closer. Directions? Like steps, the boy explained, as if he wanted someone to follow them. But they're not musical steps. They're movement, like walking or turning. The billionaire frowned slightly. Why would he hide directions inside a melody? The boy stared at the page, thinking hard. Maybe because he wanted only someone who understood his way of writing to find it. The billionaire's eyes deepened with emotion. Someone like you. The boy felt his cheeks warm. He wasn't used to being trusted with something this important. He studied the markings again. The first mark pointed upward. The next curved to the left. Then came a long straight line. Then a short dip downward. It wasn't random. It was guiding something or someone. I think, the boy said slowly, these marks lead somewhere. The billionaire didn't move. Where? The boy shook his head. I don't know yet. The billionaire stood and walked to the far corner of the room. He opened a drawer and pulled out a large map-a-po, floor plan of the mansion. He placed it on the table. Try matching the directions, he said. The boy hesitated, then carefully began tracing the pattern from the draft over the map. Upward, left, straight, down, a turn. The billionaire watched. Silent and tense, the boy lifted his hand. His fingertip rested over a room in the far left wing of the mansion. A room the billionaire hadn't mentioned. Room the boy had never seen. "What is that?" the boy asked. The billionaire stared at the spot for a long moment. His face shifted, as if memory had just reached out and touched him. "That," he said softly, "is a room I locked many years ago." The boy felt a chill run through him, not of fear, but of anticipation. "What's inside?" he asked. The billionaire let out a slow breath. "Something I thought I would never open again." He closed the map gently, as if afraid to disturb the answer hiding behind the paper. "Come," he said. The boy stood up, his heart beating fast. They walked through the hallway in silence. The mansion felt different now. The lights seemed dimmer, the air thicker. Every step felt heavier, as if they were walking toward something sacred. They reached the far left wing. The hallway here was quieter, almost untouched. Dust lined the edges of the floor. The windows were slightly dimmer. The billionaire stopped in front of a door with a lock so old it looked like it had not been touched in years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he unlocked the door. The hinges creaked softly as the door opened. The room was dark at first, but as the billionaire switched on the light, a warm glow spread across the space. The boy stepped inside slowly. It was a music room, but not like the grand one he had been using. This one was smaller, softer, and filled with personal things: photos, handwritten pages, a small piano, and a wooden chair that looked well used. This, the billionaire whispered, was his room. The boy looked around in awe. Every corner felt lived and loved, and full of memories that never had the chance to fade. He walked toward the piano. It was dusty, but still beautiful. "Try playing the melody here," the billionaire said. The boy sat on the wooden chair and placed his hands gently on the keys. His fingers moved slowly, carefully. As the melody filled the room, something unexpected happened. A soft click. The boy froze. "What was that?" he whispered. The billionaire stepped closer, his eyes widening. A small panel on the side of the piano had loosened. The boy reached toward it. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew this was no accident. The melody had been written to open it. And whatever was inside was the next part of the secret. The small panel slid open with a soft, tired sound, as if it had been waiting years for someone brave enough to touch it again. The boy leaned forward slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to miss anything. Inside the hidden space rested a thin envelope and a folded sheet of paper. Both looked old, their edges yellowed from time. The billionaire did not speak. He simply watched, his hands held together tightly behind his back. His eyes carried a mix of fear, longing, and the kind of pain that only comes from memories that never healed. The boy gently lifted the envelope first. It was light in his hands, so light it almost scared him. He placed it carefully on the small table beside the piano. Then he reached for the folded paper. It crackled softly as he opened it. The handwriting was neat, thoughtful, and familiar, the same style he had seen on the music sheets. He read the first line silently, then the second. His eyes widened. "What does it say?" the billionaire asked quietly, unable to stay silent any longer. The boy took a slow breath, then began reading out loud. "If someone is reading this, it means my music reached you." The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment, as if those words alone were enough to knock the air from his lungs. The boy continued, his voice soft and careful. "I wrote this melody the way I always wrote, with pieces of myself hidden inside. I knew some people would hear only the notes, but I hoped someone someday would hear the truth." The boy paused, The billionaire nodded gently, giving him permission to go on. I want to explain something I never had the courage to say when I was alive. I left a message in the melody, a name. Your name. I wanted you to know that everything I created was because of what you meant to me. You were the one who believed in my music when I was just starting. You were the one who told me I didn't need to be perfect to be understood. I never forgot that. The boy swallowed softly and looked up. The billionaire's face had tightened, his eyes glistening with emotion. He was too proud to let fall. The boy continued reading. I know the world sees you as strong, unstoppable. But I know another side of you too, the side that helped me when I had nothing. I wanted to leave you something that would last longer than my voice or my memory. So I hid this message in my last melody. The boy looked at the billionaire again. This time, the man had lowered his head. I also left something else, he read. A final piece. It's not a melody. It's a gift. A message for the future. I hid it in this piano so that only someone who truly understood my language could find it. I hope it reaches the right person. And I hope it brings you the same comfort your kindness brought me. The boy finished there, letting the silence settle gently over the room. For a long time, neither of them moved. The billionaire finally wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He always hid his real feelings in music, he whispered. I never imagined he wrote this for me. The boy looked at the envelope on the table. There's still this, he said. The billionaire nodded. Though his voice was too unsteady to speak. The boy picked up the envelope. It felt even lighter now, somehow more important. He opened it gently. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. When he opened it, he saw another handwritten message. But this one came with musical notes drawn along the edges, like tiny decorations. There's a second melody, the boy said softly. The billionaire looked up, surprised. Another? The boy nodded. It's small, but it looks like something new. He sat at the piano and placed the sheet where the light touched it clearly. His fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, steadying his breath. Then he played. The melody was unlike anything he had ever played before. It was soft, simple, and full of warmth. It didn't sound like a puzzle or a code. It sounded like a goodbye, quiet, gentle. Filled with gratitude. When he reached the final note, the room felt heavier than before, but softer too. As if the music had wrapped the walls with something peaceful. The billionaire stood behind him, his voice barely holding steady. He wrote that for you. The boy looked up, confused. For me? The billionaire nodded. He wrote it for whoever would solve his code, whoever could hear the message beneath the music. He knew it would take someone who understood him deeply, someone with a mind like his. The boy lowered his eyes. It felt unreal. All his life, he had been ignored, rushed aside, treated like someone who wandered too far into his imagination. And now, someone he had never met had trusted him enough to leave a final message. Hidden in a melody. The billionaire placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You're not just solving puzzles, he said. You're connecting to a musician who lived the way you live, quietly, differently, but beautifully. The boy felt his throat tighten. He didn't know how to respond. The billionaire walked to the piano and touched the old wood. This room, he said quietly, was where he created all his best work. After he passed away, I locked it because I couldn't stand the silence inside it. The boy looked around. He could feel the memories lingering in the air, the late nights, the quiet mornings, the moments of doubts, the bursts of inspiration. You brought the room back to life, the billionaire continued. You gave me a chance to hear him again. The boy looked down at the keys, then at the envelope. He wanted someone to follow his directions, he said. But we already found the message. Yes, the billionaire said. But the directions weren't leading to this room alone. The boy blinked. There's more? The billionaire nodded and reached into the hidden panel again. This time, he pulled out a small wooden box the boy hadn't noticed before. Its surface was carved with patterns, curved shapes that looked like musical symbols. The billionaire placed it on the table and opened it. Inside was a small recording device, old but still functional. A tiny note sat beside it. Play this only when the melody is understood. The boy looked at the billionaire. Should we play it? The billionaire nodded slowly. The boy pressed the small button. A crackle filled the room, and a voice, soft, warm, fragile, it was the voice of the composer, the man whose melodies had filled the mansion long before the boy ever stepped into it. If you are listening, the voice said gently, then you found the truth hidden inside my music. And that means you understand me more than most ever did. The boy's breath caught in his throat. I want you to know that music is not meant to be locked away. It is meant to be shared, passed on, given to those who can hear its heart. If you are the one who solved the message, then I want you to have something important. The billionaire glanced at the boy. The voice continued, play your own music. Don't be afraid of being different. Don't let the world silence you. People like us, we speak in shapes and patterns, in sounds that others overlook. But our voices matter. The boy felt tears pool in his eyes. Take your gift, the voice whispered, and help someone else hear the world the way we do. The recording ended. For a long moment, the music room felt like it had exhaled. The billionaire placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, steady and sincere. He left that for someone like you, he said. Someone who could continue what he started. The boy wiped his eyes gently. I don't know if I can do that. You already did, the billionaire said softly. You understood him. You gave meaning to his last message. And now, you have your own voice too. The boy looked down at the piano. He placed his hands on the keys, unsure of what to play. But as soon as his fingers touched the keys, a new melody formed. One he had never played before. One that felt like it had been waiting inside him for years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't loud, but it was his. The billionaire listened quietly, his eyes softening. When the boy finished, the billionaire spoke with a calm certainty. I want to help you share your music with the world, he said. If you'll let me. The boy's heart raced. No one had ever said words like that to him. Are you sure? He whispered, double quotes, yes, the billionaire replied. You solved a code that no expert could. But more than that, you heard what others missed. That's a gift worth sharing. The boy looked down at his hands again, then out the window where the afternoon sun warmed the sky. For the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt seen, he felt understood, and he felt ready. The billionaire smiled faintly. This is just the beginning. The boy nodded. He believed him. The secret melody had changed both of their lives. Now, a new one was waiting to be written, one that belonged to the boy, one that the world would finally hear.